My fellow Americans, on Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan that killed the emir of al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
US President Joe Biden announcing in a prime-time television address that the head of al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri, a chief architect of the 9/11 attacks on America, was killed on Saturday in a US drone strike on Kabul. One of the world's most wanted terrorists, al-Zawahiri was located by US intelligence living in a safe house in the Afghan capital. US officials say he was on the balcony of the safe house when a drone fired 2 missiles at him, killing him but causing no other deaths, and, say US officials, no civilian casualties. A family member was present nearby at the time but was reportedly unharmed. This is the first strike ordered by the US in Afghanistan since the botched troop withdrawal in August of last year. Reports say the Taliban was not aware of the attack, and indeed a Taliban spokesman called it a violation of the Doha agreements, claiming it had been carried out by the United States without pretext. Hitting back, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, in a press statement he said, "By hosting and sheltering the leader of al-Qaeda in Kabul, the Taliban grossly violated the Doha Agreement and repeated assurances to the world that they would not allow Afghan territory to be used by terrorists to threaten the security of other countries." Ayman al-Zawahiri was an Egyptian physician. He had a $25 million bounty on his head. There's no word on whether anyone is now going to collect that money. He succeeded Osama bin Laden as al-Qaeda's leader, its main organizer and strategist. His radicalization began in his youth, in his native Egypt. He merged a jihadist movement there with al-Qaeda. Then, at Osama bin Laden's side, he coordinated the September 11th attacks on Washington, D.C. and New York City that killed nearly 3,000 people. President Biden said he bore responsibility for a string of other assaults as well.
For decades, he was the mastermind behind attacks against Americans, including the bombing of the USS Cole in 2000, which killed 17 American sailors and wounded dozens more. He played a key role in the bombing of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, killing 224 and wounding over 4,500 others. He carved a trail of murder and violence against American citizens, American service members, American diplomats, and American interests. And since the United States delivered justice to bin Laden 11 years ago, Zawahiri has been a leader of al-Qaeda, the leader. From hiding, he coordinated al-Qaeda's branches and all around the world, including setting priorities for providing operational guidance that called for and inspired attacks against U.S. targets.
Democrats and Republicans have both lauded the weekend strike. Former President Barack Obama tweeted about the operation, calling it a tribute to Biden's leadership. The leaders of Saudi Arabia, Australia and Canada also hailed the strike. For more on this story, we are joined today by WION's correspondent Anas Malik, who is live today in Islamabad, and our US correspondent Susan Tehrani, live in New York City. And Anas, before I come to you for your reaction to the events of the last few hours, you, of course, were in Kabul when the Taliban took over last year, and you had an opportunity last year to ask the Taliban's spokesperson whether the Taliban could offer any guarantees that Afghanistan would not once again become a safe haven for terrorists. Let's take a listen to that.
What happens to your relation with al-Qaeda? Are you willing to give that up, or are you willing to give an assurance?
We will not allow any foreigners who wish to harm or threaten the security of other countries, any space in Afghanistan. And we have assured this.
Anas Malik in Islamabad. It looks as though the Taliban weren't necessarily telling the truth back there late last year.
Absolutely, Simon. The Taliban's relation with Al-Qaeda has been something that has been historical, and for that one really has to understand the relation that they share. It's historical, it's generational, it's geographical, it's ideological, and then the other bit is, and that is which is much more important, it's the inter-family connect. There are marriages within Taliban and Al-Qaeda family members, and that is what makes it much more complex than the lip service that the Taliban had been offering to the international community for almost a year now, since following their takeover, or even before that. So that is what led to this strike. Ayman al-Zawahiri, we understand, was not in Kabul following the takeover, but he got relocated in these 11 months following the takeover. So that is there. This strike took place very near to the residence of the former Defense Minister Bismillah Khan Mohammadi. His house was targeted last year on the 3rd of August by the Taliban. I was there, I was covering it from the ground back then for WION. And this Sherpur area, it's a considerably middle class area, but at least 3 lanes of this Sherpur area, they connect directly to Wazir Akbar Khan, or WAC as they say. Wazir Akbar Khan houses the diplomats. It's a post locality. It has the Ghazanfar Bank head office right next to it. It has the diplomatic enclave, or the green zone, and just at the start of it is the Canadian embassy and the French embassy as well. So lots of riders over there, and his presence did raise a lot of questions. The Taliban, as I said, their relation with the Al-Qaeda is complex. They're currently in a fix because there is a trust deficit that exists, and that would rather intensify following this strike or following this killing, because the Al-Qaeda people within the Al-Qaeda have long been accusing the Taliban of cahooting with the US forces in their negotiations and using Al-Qaeda as a leverage point. Simon?
Anna, stay with us, but I want to bring Susan Tehrani into our conversation now. Susan, this was a big moment for President Biden in the United States on Monday night, a real opportunity for him to put behind him questions that had really been attached to him over the fact that when Barack Obama was given the opportunity to launch the successful strike that eliminated Osama bin Laden, Joe Biden at the time was the only voice in the Situation Room as vice president opposing that operation. That's all past now, isn't it, with this with removal of Ayman al-Zawahiri from the battlefield?
This was definitely Joe Biden's bin Laden moment, something that he definitely needed. But also what you mentioned really proves the nuances of becoming commander-in-chief and the decisions that you have to make as the president of the United States, and the luxury that you don't have, for example, being on the sidelines. You know, we talk a lot about what has passed, but the significance right now of this very notable development, first of all, it is that it's celebrated, it brought closure to many 9/11 victims and families, also closure for the CIA that has been hunting al-Zawahiri down for decades. But also the timing is very significant. We now know that the United States has been following Zawahiri at least from April. He's been in Afghanistan perhaps longer. So, you know, on the one hand, you talk about whether Biden was opposed to the bin Laden raid, but on the other hand, he has other things to worry about right now as president, which is, you know, the 1-year anniversary of that faulty withdrawal from Afghanistan, and also some questions about whether or not the United States would have those over-the-horizon capabilities to be able to target terrorists from outside of Afghanistan without boots on the ground.
Anas Malik, back to you, and briefly, if you will, what happens now at the head of al-Qaeda? Presumably there'll be another leader along in a moment.
Well, we'd have to wait for at least 3 months for that, 2 to 3 months, and a new leader will be elected. But what you have to understand is how Zawahiri operated. Zawahiri decentralized the structure of Al-Qaeda, contrary to how Osama bin Laden operated, which was very centralized. So what he did was he made an ideologue, and he said that X or Y groups, if they follow this ideologue, then they are authorized to carry out operations. So we would be expecting some sort of a revenge attack, but not immediately, but in time to come, as and when a new leader is elected. Of course, the bigger blow is to Al-Qaeda, because one of the ideological figures with Osama bin Laden, who was in his adversarial role to Osama bin Laden, have now been taken out. So what happens to Al-Qaeda? Will it be sticking to its core ideology of terror? Will it be able to stick on that or not? Will it be or would we be seeing them dismembering? That is something more of a key question that would be very, very keenly washed out. Simon?
WION's Anas Malik live for us in Islamabad today, and Susan Tehrani live for us in New York City. Thanks to both of you. We're also being joined today by Ahmedshah Mohibi. He is the president of Rise to Peace, a counter-terrorism organisation based here in Washington, D.C. He has also been an advisor to the U.S. Department of State and Defence. Mr. Mohibi, thanks very much indeed for your time today. This development kind of cuts in two separate directions for the Biden administration, doesn't it? On the one hand, it does demonstrate that the over-the-horizon opportunities to implement security in Afghanistan that the president promised are workable. But on the other hand, it must be a bit of a shock to have found Ayman al-Zawahiri in Kabul.
Absolutely, it is. We were looking into how the over-the-horizon counterterrorism strategy operation will work. Well, this shows a great sense of improvement and success for the Biden administration, that we do have capabilities to eliminate targets in any part of the world, as President Biden stated and warned many of the terrorist groups on the world. And on the other hand, it goes back to the Doha deal that former President Trump made with the Taliban, where the Taliban has constantly violated the deal, meaning that the Taliban agreed to not host the Al-Qaeda members and other terrorist groups in Afghanistan. But since last year, so it's going to mark 1 year in August 15, the Taliban has turned Afghanistan into a safe haven for terrorism. I mean, period, that's it. Ayman al-Zawahiri was found near that complex of Sirajuddin Haqqani. See if we can give it just a few seconds to see if it returns, and it has returned. Mr. Mohibi, let me just ask you another question. You were talking there about the notion that Ayman al-Zawahiri had relocated to Kabul. I mean, does that indicate that more generally Al-Qaeda figures, not just prominent leaders, but others within Al-Qaeda, are feeling a little bit more relaxed about their movement now US forces have withdrawn from Afghanistan? Well, I think we have lost the audio there to Ahmedshah Mohibi, the president of Rise to Peace, a counter-terrorism organisation based in Washington, D.C. We'll try and bring him back to talk about these developments on another day, because they are going to remain relevant for a while to come.